Morning, everyone. This is Frank Christian. I am reviewing the lesson for Chapter 9 on the ways of the alongside-er for you to have as a reference. The goal of this week is to do the way of the triple play. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint that we have. There we go. And we can see what's going on, and we'll start from the beginning. Just to review, okay, why is that? There we go. Now, just to review what we have, this again is the way of the triple play. It's an interesting thing. Being navigators, they like to do a lot of illustrations, so we have all of that going on. Now, where I want to start was first just to do a recap of what we did. We're in a section now of the ways of the alongside-er where we're talking about skills. And the previous lesson was the way of discovery. It was alongside-ers ask questions and tell stories. That was led by Jim Zylinka. Then this week, what we're looking at is the way of the triple play. Alongside-ers practice application, accountability, and affirmation. And then the next lesson will be the way of mission. Alongside-ers recruit people to live as insiders. And again, that will be with me. So as we go through it, remember, source of all of this is the Great Commission to make disciples of all nations. I view that as enlisting them as learners, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And he is with us. Okay, so let's take a quick look. Here's our illustration of the bullseye. Remember, the bullseye is the disciple that we're trying to make, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to develop in a relationship with God. It starts out with our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. Remember, we studied that and we looked at what that was going. That's going to help us open the door to do discovery and discussion around the Bible, which we talked about before. And into this week, we're going to look at the triple play, or the 3 A's: application, accountability, and affirmation. And your lesson covered all of that, and it starts on page 93 of the book. So let's go on into it here for a minute. Remember that what is one of the reviews that we had is that asking good questions is at the heart of helping helping somebody become what they want to be. The idea of a question is that the person comes to the conclusion by themselves. He's not persuaded by my preaching. He's persuaded by looking at what's going on. When you ask good questions, you have to do it at the right time. You have to know what type of question you're asking, what you're looking for, and there has to be trust between the questioner and the questionee. So let's look at these questions from this book. One of the things that the book commented on was the idea that it really is a whole lot easier to sit down and listen to a sermon than it is to apply. And the question that you want to spend some time discussing is, why is that true? Why is it that we have heard how many thousands of sermons in our lifetime, but how much application have we really done? And so we really want to look at that whole question of application. The book gives an illustration on page 95 called the spec. It's something I use regularly. In any passage of scripture, is there a sin to confess? Then I should confess it. Is there a promise I can claim? Then I should claim it in prayer before the Lord. Is there an example I should follow or not follow in terms of what I see? Is there a command? Is there an imperative in there that I need to obey? Is there a new knowledge or insight that we have for God? Now, the key to this application that we're looking at is there can be long-term applications and there are short-term applications. The goal on page 95 is, remember, the goal is to respond to the Holy Spirit right now. An application may be done in the next 10 minutes, the next 10 hours, or the next 10 days. Seldom is it a commitment for a lifetime. It's a chance for you as part of our walk with God. James 1:22 tells us not to merely listen to the word and so deceive ourselves, which is why I think it's easier to listen than apply, because we deceive ourselves. Do what it says. Now, if you will notice on page 97, there were several expressions of love in terms of this issue of accountability. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we look at that whole question. Accountability keeps us sharp. It invites people into our life to help me be faithful. My ultimate accountability is to God and not to people. We can come alongside people daily, is one of my personal things, and it will cost us something. Okay. Now, one of the things we needed to look at in this question of accountability is how do we keep it from turning into something negative? It's not me holding you accountable for what's going on and then hammering you when you don't get it done and in condemnation. No, the idea of accountability is not punishment. The idea of accountability is encouragement to keep on doing what's going on because we know our inherent weakness and our inherent tendency is probably not to do it as well as we should. Having someone else can do it gives me a better return for my labor, and it helps me if I should fall, and it keeps me from falling if I have enough people with me. So this idea of accountability has got some negative connotations in our time, and I don't think that's the biblical explaining of it. We want it to result in faithfulness without becoming a negative experience. Now, one of the other things we did was we discussed question 10, which I thought was really important. Jake has asked for accountability. He's established some practical steps to seek forgiveness and restore relationship. Some of these questions are good questions you can ask, and some of these questions are bad questions we can ask. We need to be careful about performance and guilt assigning something to somebody because we can get into somebody's head and it really can be negative. Performance happens when my acceptance or love of another is based on what they do. We accept and we love people because of who Christ is and what they have done. We are working to improve. We are working to discipline is the idea of making things better. It's the idea of coming alongside and actually doing accountability lets me know and keeps me focused on whether I'm doing better or not and having somebody else to see it. So these accountability statements in here, as we were looking about here, some of them could be good or bad. You might want to take a look at that. One of the things that I thought was a negative statement on there was on bottom of 98. I think you should restore your relationship with your brother in these 3 steps. I think you have to be very, very careful about that one. That makes him dependent upon you, and he then becomes obedient to you. And if he doesn't do what you want him to do, he's going to be accountable on what's going on. The question is, he should discover those steps. And I think the thing we have to understand is that this thing is going to take time. There are things that look so obvious to us, but if you don't have the right to speak, if you don't have the bridge of relationship that's strong enough to bear the weight of truth, you can create something premature and cause it to collapse. The building, you don't want to use the building before you've got the foundation set. Okay? You don't want to cross the bridge until it's ready to cross. Then the other thing you have to bear in mind is you yourself may not understand everything about what's really going on. Proverbs 18:13 tells us, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame unto him. Galatians 6:2 tells us, brethren, if a man be overtaken in fault, you which are spiritual, I think 6:1, should restore one another, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Okay? So the idea is we want to ask questions to build the accountability. Now, I want to move on to the next topic of affirmation. And the idea here is that affirmation makes a difference. Now, what's really interesting is one of my Marines actually read this on the line and decided he was going to do something. And the experiment goes something like this. You take some rice, you put water in it, you put it in a jar. You get 3 jars. 1 jar you don't do anything with. A jar of rice. The second jar, you speak to it affirming and encouraging words every day. You come to it and you talk about how great it is and what's going on. The third jar is you come and you become negative and you become hostile and you become critical of the jar. Now this is amazing. So he did this on on 8/8 of 24. Here's what it looked like. When the one that he hated, the one he talked to, you can see all of the stuff that's going on here. But look at the one that he affirmed with love. You could see the beginnings of some mold. It's better than the control. There's some, but look at the difference between how affirmation worked with rice. Now, if it works with rice that's sitting on a jar, how much more could it work with us, with people back and forth? So when you're making your disciple, your goal with that guy or that woman, the person you're helping, is to spend time, and you're really going to win a lot more flies with honey than you will with vinegar. Okay, so saw that really interesting, and I saw that applied to this lesson. So one of the questions we need to think about is, what are some of the practical ways that you can affirm one another? Let them know that was a good idea. Let them know that, you heard something that was wise. Let them know that it sounds really, really good. Thank them for what they have done for you. There's a whole series of verses on question 11 on page 99 that the Bible speaks to the power of affirming words and speech. And you might want to take some time and looking on that. What are some of the 4 affirming practices on page 100? If you go there, there's what they call simple practices. There's quality affirmation. That identifies progress. You identify that quality affirmation is specific. It's not just, you're a great guy. Quality affirmation is God-centered. It's not that you're a great guy. It's that God seems to be working in this thing, and this seems to be a direction that you're going. Quality affirmation is about others and not yourselves. We're showing honor, not receiving honor. Focus on affirming others without manipulation for yourself. So if you look at those things, this question was part of what we did a discussion with. Now, as a practice, take a time to actually do some affirming statements. Can you do something? Can you honestly see something about somebody else that they're doing that seems to be biblical and seems to be moving them toward the kingdom? If you can't, you're probably not paying close enough attention, and you need to be praying about that. Okay? So, some final thoughts. One-to-one time. On page 101 and 102, what he did was, there's a backstory and the idea that you have to focus on what's going on. So if we use that illustration, you have a bullseye, the idea of a disciple. You go deep in relationships when you're with them as part of your time. Discovery and discussion. You should be spending some time on the Bible with your guy. You should be spending some time with what's going on with them. And then affirmation. Is there something I can affirm? Is there something I can encourage them to take a step on the next time, whatever they think? And how do we know whether we did it when we meet these? Now, this is kind of mechanical, but it's actually a very healthy tool for you to put together a quick outline in your mind. And I'd recommend you do it on a simple 3x5 card or a sheet of paper, so that when you're meeting with somebody, you actually have something focused that you're trying to do. This requires you to be praying and spending some time with them. But that's kind of how we make a disciple. Remember, application means to, by Warren Wiersbe, this is a great quote. Application means to bring together God's truth and God's people in such a way that that the people's hearts will feel the truth, their minds understand the truth, and their wills want to act on what they've heard from the word. That's a really good quote on it. So I want to thank you for your time. And I think that's probably where we can stop right now, and keep track, and make sure if you have questions, you can contact Jim Zylingo, or you can contact any of the folks at the church there. I'm available too, but maybe a little harder to get a hold of me. I will talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.